The clip that you just had the opportunity to see from 60 Minutes nicely sets up the topic of our Churchill Club discussion tonight, a quest to bring fairness to the markets. Welcome. I'm Karen Tucker, CEO at the Churchill Club, and we are very privileged to have with us tonight Brad Katsuyama, CEO of IEX, and Michael Lewis, the acclaimed author of Flash Boys, A Wall Street Revolt, and The Big Short, among many other very important works. And here to lead them in conversation is Rami Brunitsky from Sapphire Ventures. Their conversation will cover evolving trends, challenges, and opportunities for disruption on Wall Street. But first, of course, as always, some thanks are in order to Rami and the wonderful team at Sapphire Ventures, Shruti, Anis, and also Gerald Lamb of IEX. And finally, but importantly, RBC Capital Markets. Without the help of these individuals and companies, this program would not have been possible. Thank you. A few words about Churchill Club, now in its 4th decade. This is the premier nonprofit technology and business forum serving the innovation community here in the Silicon Valley region. And I have to say, I've been in this role now as CEO. I'm in my 9th year, and it is so gratifying to see so many people here tonight, past speakers, our present speakers, and I think probably some future speakers also. These are the people who care about supporting and sharing in the mission to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit, and these are people who are willing to contribute their views they see about the opportunities ahead. Tonight's hashtag is Churchill Club, and you'll find other Twitter pointers in your program. Our moderator, Rami Brunitsky, is a managing director at Sapphire Ventures, which, by the way, is an investor in IEX. Rami is also a longtime Churchill Club board member. He was previously a startup CEO, and he held many senior executive positions at SAP. Please welcome Rami Brunitsky.
Yeah, so great. I didn't know this is my part, but welcome. Good evening. So again, my name is Rami Brunitsky, and I'm going to be the moderator, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to have two wonderful speakers with us tonight. And I think when it comes to Michael Lewis, I can speak for myself. I'm a huge Michael Lewis fan, and I'm sure there are many, many like me in the crowd. There you go. And obviously, going back to my MBA days when Liar's Poker was a must-read, still is a classic. But then again, the wonderful books that came after, whether it's Moneyball, obviously made into a great movie, The Blind Side, The Big Short, which is now nominated to 5 Academy Awards, which is phenomenal. So congrats, Michael, for that as well. And last but not least, one piece of anecdote. Michael joins us tonight after pretty much a 20-hour flight from Israel. And so I really appreciate the fact that you're out here with us tonight, and hopefully we'll make it worth your while. Please join me on stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I want to introduce you to Brad. And it's interesting. At Sapphire Ventures, we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and we obviously invest in some great companies as well. And we usually, and I know that there are some venture capitalists in the room as well, when you normally look at the business, you look at the fundamentals. You know, is it growing quickly? Is it a good team? You know, do you believe in the business, and so on? And really, every once in a while, a long while, comes along an entrepreneur that really wows you. And every time I had a chance and the pleasure to talk to Brad, I was just so impressed by his courage and his ability to stand up for what's right, and also figure out how to make it a great business as well. And as you'll see tonight, Brad is just a wonderful, wonderful speaker and someone who's truly on a mission to change the world and to change our lives for the better. So with that, Brad, why don't you join us?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so before we talk about Flash Boys, Michael, I have a question I'm sure many folks here would be able to relate to, which is when you think about a book, when you sort of like start embarking on a journey to write a new book, do you have a thesis in mind? Do you have an idea as to how the book is going to play itself out, or do you let the story take you where it's going to take you?
Much more the latter than the former. I never go in. It always surprises me when people ask me when I sit down with him in the beginning of trying to figure out whether it's a book. I spend an awful lot of time trying to figure out whether it's a book. When they ask me what's your angle, because I never have an angle. I don't know. You know, what gets me going usually is some combination of a character who interests me in a situation that I find riveting. And then I just, I spend a lot of time with them trying to figure out what the story is, and do a lot of work around them. So in this case, I went up and spent time with his mom in Canada and his old high school friends, and trying to get a sense. I thought he was too good to be true, right? So I was looking for. The problem with his story was I could not find any dirt. I mean, there was like nothing, and it's hard to bring a character to life when he's just a good guy.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time just kind of trying to figure out I don't know what the story is. I'm just interested in the situation and the person. And eventually, I have to figure out what the story is, but often that doesn't really happen until I've started to write it, and things start to happen on the page, and then it starts to take shape, and I'm off.
How long did it take you, by the way, to write Flash Boys?
Well, he probably knows better than I do. I think from the time I met him to the time the book came out, year and a half, about a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
All right, Brad, the good guy. So I think that the notion of the book is about really, and what IX is doing is about leveling the playing field. As you were sort of like kind of working during your career, and obviously as you were kind of exploring what's going on with the stock market, and that's described beautifully in the book, at what point did you have the sort of like the epiphany, the understanding that something's awfully wrong, and I gotta figure out what the truth is?
Yeah, so I guess a bit of background. So I grew up in Canada and worked for the Royal Bank of Canada, which was kind of it was the place to work when you live in Canada. And moved to the United States in 2002. And I traded energy stocks, I traded tech stocks, and in 2007, just realized that when I'd pull up my trading screens and I'd see an offer for 25,000 Microsoft, and I would try to buy it. In 2006, I could buy 25,000, but in 2007, I could only buy 15 of that 25. And by 2009, I could only buy 10,000 of the 25, and it drove me crazy. And it wasn't, I tell people a lot, I'm the accidental entrepreneur. I could have retired at RBC. I love the company. I love the people. They sponsored the event tonight, so right. Thanks to my former team. I never really wanted to start a company. I just never had that desire. But what happened over I guess the course of my career at RBC, we ended up building great products. We went from number 19 to number 1 in electronic trading, but you realize that we were only helping people trade with RBC. We weren't fixing the systemic problem in this very bizarre relationship that developed between stock exchanges like New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ and a group of high-speed traders that most people in this room will have no idea who these firms are. Why are these the most important customers of the stock exchange? And that was kind of the mission that we went on, and then continued into IEX. So really, it was kind of, and I think it kind of was very similar. I saw Michael go through this same mental exercise, because at first you're turning some rocks over and you find some stuff. And actually, I met Michael. He was writing a story about somebody else. There was a guy, Sergey Alanikov, gets thrown in prison for taking high-frequency trading computer.
He's also featured in the book. Yeah.
Right. So can I explain how this book came about? Because I'll spell him for a sec. When I was working on this starts with The Big Short. I was finishing The Big Short. How many people have seen the movie of The Big Short? All right, there we go. Pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Pretty good. So in the movie, the guy, Vinny, Danny, and Porter, the three guys who, they make the jokes about the testicles, and they're all just funny. The guys who got out of Florida and the alligator gets them, and those guys they are just wonderful sources about Wall Street, generally. And as I was finishing The Big Short, they said, "We got your next book for you." And I said, I can't tell you how many times people tell me that. And I said, yeah. And they said, no, there's this guy from the Royal Bank of Canada who's running around who's explained to us what we're seeing on our trading screens, which is bizarre. And it's just the story of the century kind of thing, because they were stock market investors. And I said, yeah, and I ignored them. And then a year and a half later, I'm reading about this Russian computer programmer, high-frequency trading programmer for Goldman Sachs, who is thrown in jail for stealing high-frequency trading code from Goldman. And my state of mind at that moment was, you're telling me the only person on the back end of the financial crisis who gets thrown in jail from Goldman Sachs is the person Goldman Sachs wants thrown in jail. I thought, that's a story. And then I realized, and so I went, and I happened to know the guy's lawyer. So I had some access to him. And I realized then that I had to all of a sudden know about high-frequency trading, which Vinny and Danny Porter were trying to tell me about 18 months earlier. And I called him up. I said, that guy you said I was going to write a book about, could he explain to me how this works? Because until then, no one even mentioned high-frequency trading. This is the beginning of the mentions in the newspaper. And so we all went out to dinner. Vinny, Danny Porter, and me and Brad, and Ronan, right? Ronan, where are you? Ronan, there he is. Yeah. There he is. Yeah. The Irish comic relief,
yeah,
but also an impressive character, Ronan. He was, but anyway. So, and at the end of the dinner, I thought, my God, they were right. This is a book. You know, I mean, so I started to listen to these, and it took a while to figure out how to do the book, but that's how it began.
So I have a question which I reserved for later, but I'll probably ask it now. What kind of parallels do you find between Flash Boys and other books you wrote in the past about Wall Street?
There's one that's really clear. It's not Wall Street. It's the closest. So this book, you never want to write the same book twice. The Big Short interested me because I thought when I wrote Liar's Poker 25 years ago, it was the only book I was ever going to write about Wall Street because I'd never have access again, because everybody hated me after the book came out. But then they all loved me because the next generation all read it. And so I had access to write The Big Short, and I thought that was the bookend. I was describing kind of the beginning of this new structure on Wall Street in Liar's Poker without knowing that's what I was describing and how it came to grief, 20 years later, 25 years later. And then I thought I was really done. This was different because this was the first hopeful sign I felt in how Wall Street might be reformed. It was so depressing watching the post-financial crisis action in Washington. I found that so depressing. I thought, the system's never going to fix it. Here we have market-based change. This could work. This could work. But more than that, market-based change that was laced with idealism. People actually wanted their life to have meaning and purpose in the financial sector, which was a novel idea. And he was attracting people like himself, right? They didn't just want to make money. He wanted to make the world better in the financial sector. That's just great. The thing that was the book that's the most similar in my experience was Moneyball. And because it was, in both cases, you have a disruptive entrepreneur creating a shitstorm. Because he's exposing the problems of the industry at the same time. And the response to the two books were very similar.
Interesting.
The outrage on the back end of it, very
I also
similar.
think that I saw somewhere, maybe on a Charlie Rose interview, where you compared it to The Lord of the Ring.
Well, he's Frodo, right? So I thought, right. I was thinking of the great. This had a mythical dimension to it, and I thought, what is this like? And I thought that he actually is Frodo in Lord of the Rings. He's sitting in the middle of this, what is going to be a war of the worlds, and on one side are the orcs, which are high-frequency trading firms, and the public exchanges that have sold themselves out to high-frequency traders. And on the other side are hobbits and elves and dwarfs, and these are small investors. These are institutional investors. Their interests are so opposed on this issue. The actual investors who are serving a social function their interests are so opposed to the existing structure. And the question was how the collision was going to happen. And he's the mechanism for the collision.
So
As long as he survives, the world, there's hope.
And thrives. And thrives.
Survive. Let's just start with survive.
Right. So, Brad, I think that, specifically here in the Valley, you see a lot of, obviously, disruption is one big buzzword. And it's somewhat different, I think, if you are coming from the outside. Take Elon Musk, right? One of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, disrupting automotive or sort of like space exploration. But he's an outsider, right? So you come in and you disrupt from the outside. You're an insider. You are working for some of the firms, or you dealt with some of the firms that now have a very different interest than yours. What is it like to be an insider who is disrupting?
It's definitely a lot more uncomfortable. I think the hard part about Flash Boys was that when it went off, a lot of time people on their way out say things and do things, and the next day I had to show up again and face a lot of the people that absolutely got destroyed in the book, and so it was uncomfortable to a point. But I think in general, I've never really had an attachment to Wall Street in particular. I didn't follow it when I was a kid. In college, I really had no desire to go there. I just kind of ended up at Royal Bank because my dad thought it might be something interesting. So I never really had this strong. I guess in a way I never felt like it defined me. In the financial crisis, actually, and I believe this was in the book, I sat down with my wife in 2009, and I said, I think I'm done. I said, I think I want to change. It's stressful. My blood pressure was through the roof. I just didn't. RBC really. I think we were 55th on the list of write-downs, so we weren't a major cause of it. It just didn't feel like something I wanted to do with my life. And then I got switched into a job where I started to surround myself with computer programmers and engineers, and that's what led down this quest. But I was literally months away from just quitting, just walking away without even a job. We actually were trying to decide what city we wanted to live in. And I said, I'll just find a job somewhere else. So I think there's a general detachment from it. Yeah. And I think that kind of let me, and again, so when Michael got interested, again, I had to sit down with my wife and I said, as this is kind of heating up, and really you're either all in or you're not in. There's no such thing as kind of like telling Michael some things and not telling him other things. It's either you're all in or not. And I said to my wife, I said, are we ready to kind of do this?
So you knew the consequences of going with that book?
This probably, even to this day, is probably, this will be my last job on Wall Street. And whether I'm in this job for 20 years or whether I'm in this job for another year, this will be my last job on Wall Street. I'm almost convinced of that. And you kind of have to come to terms with that before you really, in a way, kind of go to war against your own industry. So yeah, I've been fine with that the whole time.
And for those of you who watched, I think it was the CEO of Bats and you going at it.
Right.
I think Michael.
I was a spectator.
You were a spectator.
So actually, it quickly becomes clear every time I write a book, especially when it creates a firestorm like this one did at Moneyball, that at the ham and eggs breakfast, I'm the chicken and he's the pig. Yeah. Right? And so it feels a little like you going onto the schoolyard and you pick a fight with a bully and say, "Go get him, Brad," and that's what happened. And it happened the first day. It happened with.
So along these lines, do you feel, or are you surprised by the outcome, by the consequences? I mean, IEX, obviously, we'll talk about IEX in a second, but in terms of the public attention to the topic, do you feel that has been sort of like well served as far as the book goes and as far as what you were...
Me? Yes,
yeah.
to me?
Yeah.
I think we're at a really, really important moment in the history of the financial sector. I really do think that this is a way forward, this market-based reform, and if they are stymied by anything other than their own ineptitude, if they were just bad at it, like if the exchange didn't work, that would be one thing. But right now, the SEC is contemplating not letting them become a public exchange because a cabal of high-frequency traders and public exchanges who hire SEC people when they come out of the SEC to work for them are trying to shut it down and finding all kinds of really bad arguments to do so. So to answer your question,
Yep.
there is a minor uprising in response to this. If you Google it, you can read all about it. David Swenson, the head of the Yale Endowment, wrote an article in the New York Times saying, look, the market's rigged. These guys can fix it. It may not be the ideal solution would be if the regulators actually did something, but these guys will fix it. Get out of the way, regulators. Let them fix it. And it's outrageous to me there's not more of a public uprising. I mean, I think this is, you remember Occupy Wall Street? Yeah. You should multiply that 20 times and they should be marching around the SEC right now. It's that big a deal. Yes. It's that big a deal. Yes. And at stake are issues of fairness and justice and decency. I mean, it's like putting the financial sector back in its box. And this is a mechanism for doing it. So I've been disappointed. I mean, there was lots of controversy when the book came out, but I'm surprised there isn't more public outrage on this subject.
So maybe, Brad, why don't you walk us through what exactly is IX about, and how are you going to level the playing field, and why is it that the other exchanges don't like what you propose?
Sure. So at a very high level, one of the biggest issues in the market today is that stock exchanges like New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ sell two things. They sell high-speed data, meaning if you want to learn about a price change in a stock before someone else, you have to pay for that ability. And then part two is that they sell what's called co-location or low latency technology, which means that you can take your servers. So when you turn on CNBC and you see a bunch of people running around on the floor, no trading happens on that floor. All of the trades are beamed out to a data center in New Jersey. And what they do is they sell you the ability, or a high-speed trader the ability, to take their servers and put it in that data center right next to the exchange servers, so that when information is broadcast, not only are they getting it first, but they can trade thousands of times before the last person in line actually finds out what's happening in the stock market. And it's essentially created a form of scalping that affects anyone who's not a part of that game. And that ends up being pensions and retirements, and it ends up being 401ks and a bunch of things. And it's not happening $1 at a time, but it's happening pennies at a time. And if anyone's actually seen the movie Office Space, it's, you know, when you round those into the bank account, it grows. So in a way, it's kind of diffuse harm. You're harming everyone little bits, but it's concentrated benefit. You're amassing, a very small number of firms are amassing this huge wealth. And I think one of the problems is that when we started IEX, we said, well, how do we take some of these advantages away? We didn't want to ask the regulators to change the rules. We didn't want to go down and say this should be legal or illegal, and we're free market entrepreneurs. I mean, that we believe in market-based solutions. So what we did is we took an idea from the existing exchanges, and what we did is we coiled 38 miles of cable in a box. And what it did is it's the opposite of bringing someone close. It's actually pushing people far away. And coiling cable in a box created a speed bump that's now measured 350 microseconds, millionths of a second.
Explain how that works. Explain why when you coil the cable in a box, that diffuses the advantage that high frequency.
Sure. So essentially, when the price of a stock goes from 10 to 9, and that's broadcast out, there is a race for people that know the stock is trading at 9 to want to go out and sell to a buyer at 10 if the buyer doesn't know that the price has changed. That trade has to happen on an exchange or on a dark pool. So what happens is you're racing around to try to...
Dark pool is an exchange, is a private exchange.
It's kind of a lightly regulated exchange.
Yeah, private exchange.
Yeah.
So not only do you want to sell to a buyer at 10, because that's not the price anymore,
yep.
You want to do that transaction on an exchange that also doesn't know what the price is. So what you have now is you have exchanges actually, and the fight I got in on CNBC was with an exchange CEO who is taking in the slowest possible data feed into their market and selling high-speed traders the fastest data feed, which means that the traders are faster than the exchange itself, which means the exchange is just printing trades at the wrong price.
Yep.
So what IEX first thing we did is we went out and built the fastest possible exchange we could. But we knew that high-speed traders would always have a leg up. Right. They're always going to be faster. They're always refreshing their technology. So by slowing them down by 350 millionths of a second, the stock goes from 10 to 9, and they place an order on IEX to sell stock at 10. And it has to go around the coils. And as it's going around the coils, it gives IEX time to realize the price has changed to 9, which means we won't let any trades happen at 10. So in a way, any investor, anyone in this room that has an order on IEX, every time a trade happens on IEX, both the buyer and the seller are properly informed of what the right price is. Millions of trades are happening every single day between someone who knows the price and someone who actually doesn't, on exchanges that don't. And now what you would say, well, why would an exchange do that? Exchanges do that because the people pay hundreds of millions of dollars collectively to put their servers in the building and to buy the fast data. New York Stock Exchange actually makes more money selling the data and technology than they actually do from trading. So exchanges don't make money from trading. They make money by selling stuff to other people. But no one wants to pay to be on the other end of a 38-mile coiled box of cable. That's what we've done.
Technology, in a sense, it was technology and regulation that created the problem, and now you're trying to use technology to, in a sense, solve the problem.
Yeah, technology brought a lot of great things to the stock market, and so I think it's cheaper, it's faster, et cetera, et cetera. So there were natural efficiencies technology was going to bring.
Yep.
But in classic Wall Street fashion, that technology is being massively abused to the benefit of very few people at the expense of everyone who doesn't understand what I just told you. So the challenge becomes, and it's interesting, when we found out this stuff at RBC, because we first discovered a lot of this stuff when I was working at RBC, I went home one night and was very happy. We made this huge discovery and it felt like kind of we really figured it out. And then I actually realized that there's no way in the world we were the first people to figure it out. Because everyone who realized what I just told you went to the other side and was the ones doing this. No one had talked about it. So you realize maybe we're 20th or 25th.
You're the first Canadian. That's
maybe.
So that's the secret here. He's Canadian, and this is what's left of solid Midwestern American decency is in Canada.
But but we were the first people to talk about it, and so that 350 millionths of a second has caused a massive controversy. And to give you a context, it's 1/1000th the speed of you blinking your eye.
Yeah.
And I read in the Wall Street Journal, there was an op-ed written 2 days ago by a former SEC commissioner, actually.
Yes.
And he said that IEX slowing the market down by 350 millionths of a second is going to reduce investor confidence in displayed quotes.
Is that the Paul Atkins?
Yeah, I felt like saying, first of all, who can actually tell the difference between a quote showing up now or 350 microseconds from now?
But what he said was, and I think that it's important to pause and maybe kind of I'll play the contrarian for a second. What he said was, you guys are a Band-Aid. What you need is like a major overhaul as far as legislation.
It's the classic incumbent partnering, using regulation to prevent the new entrant from disrupting. It's classic. And what they're doing is, regulation NMS went in 2007. People have been complaining about it since 2007. We had the flash crash in 2010 where trillions of dollars were wiped out. And we debated it back then. So now all of a sudden, they want to fix all of the market debates. Let's settle all of that before we approve a 67-person company that's trying to help investors. Of course they want to do that. That debate could rage on for 25 years. So I think that they're using the machine against the new entrant.
Which is interesting. I mean, when I think about an equivalent company, I would think what you see against some of the, I guess the movement against Uber as an example. Right. It's like that you're really disrupting when you create that kind of antagonism in the market. What's
funny is when Flash Boys first came out, the very easy thing to say was it's fiction. None of this is true. Brad's full of you know what. It was very easy to say that over and over and over. Fiction this, none of it's true. It's all that. I testified in front of the Senate and basically said everything I said to Michael. I said no one else from the cabal was next to me then, right? But now all of a sudden, if it was all a marketing gimmick, if it was all fiction, why is everyone fighting so hard to prevent us from competing? Yep. New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, who are two absolute bitter enemies, formed a lobbying group in December.
That says a lot.
It's when those two competitors join forces, you realize that you're onto something.
Can I ask a question?
That's right, please.
Because where we are, so when I was thinking of him as Frodo, and I was thinking of the forces, right? that one of the forces, I mean, one on the force of good, I thought big investors, that you know, big mutual funds kind of thing would obviously rally to this cause. But I also thought Silicon Valley, because one, they'd identify with his place in this particular market, but also because Silicon Valley has a big interest, even though the stock market is 3,000 miles away, it has a big interest in the integrity of that market. And the question I want to ask you is, what could Silicon Valley do to speed the change?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're in what's called the public comment process, and anyone can write the SEC and voice their opinion about what they think is happening. Right now, the last 4 exchanges, all owned by bats, coincidentally, have been approved in the last 10 years, and they had a total of 3 comment letters between 4 of them. IEX has now 330 and growing, but that now, even 330 I don't think is enough to really kind of take on the establishment. I think, you know, every time we come out here, it feels like our story falls on more receptive ears than back home, because there's so many entrenched interests that don't want the system to change. They just, you know, they heavily resist.
So how is it actionable as far as the audience here? You have some CEOs here, you have CFOs, and then you have all of us, you know, with our portfolio. I mean, how is it actionable? What can I do tomorrow to support you?
So I mean, there's public companies that want to list on IEX, and that's very helpful. So we're meeting with a lot of companies. Someone started a website called supportiex.com, and when you go to that website, it sends you to the SEC site to submit comment letters. You know, I think, you know, info@IEX Trading is a place you can come in and figure out ways to help. So, you know, there's a lot of different pockets of influence. You know, the CIO from Yale, I did a talk at Yale, and he was luckily he was in the crowd. And so in those kinds of voices, as Michael says, that has major influence when people that understand the market or that come from positions of influence, you know, when they speak up, it's actually very, very important.
Yeah.
And you know, we just need more of that.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, and I think obviously your story is a very courageous one, but Michael.
Mine is even more courageous.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're taking on big banks.
Let's get to the real stuff.
Yeah, big banks, mortgage industry, sports. I mean, aren't you concerned or ever worried about, I mean, these are big, powerful bodies. You're not concerned about sort of like making enemies within those industries?
Well, I have made enemies, but it doesn't, you know, what can happen? I can get shot or sued. And I've been sued.
Did anyone ever dissuade you from writing?
Does anybody ever do what?
Dissuade you from writing?
You know, it's funny. The only time that I can think of someone who was kind of a powerful, rich person trying to talk me out of writing a book was Moneyball. And it was John Henry, who had just bought the Boston Red Sox, and he was assuming he was going to hire Billy Beane to run it. Right. And that he saw that there were these huge advantages. He got it. He came from Wall Street. He understood how you could use data to get advantages in marketplace. He saw what they were doing, and he was going to do it himself. And he didn't say he'd pay me, but he basically said, please, what can we do to talk you out of writing this book so that we can go exploit the market with real money? And nobody, because if you write this book, everybody's going to know. Yep. So that was the only time anybody's ever done anything like that to me. Wall Street, the answer is no. I mean, I have people who are, what they do, the villains in this case, what they do is they have journalists who are friendly to them, kind of pocket journalists who will write kind of slimy articles, and they threaten lawsuits, but that's kind of it. And I do think that I'm in a nice place where I feel like the truth will out. I mean, no matter, eventually people will figure out what's right. It's not that they're not mistakes in books. I mean, there's a mistake in every book I've ever written, but they're relatively trivial. And so what I've faced in the way of opposition doesn't feel very serious. And you're talking about, from his point of view, from Brad's point of view, when he goes in to try to change this market, he just put it very well. The benefits are concentrated in the hands of the few, and those people have enormous interest in preserving the status quo and enormous resources to do so. And the costs are imposed across the society, and no one person really has that much incentive. It's a problem of the commons to stand up and take a stand against the status quo. But with me, it's a little different because I'm addressing a big audience. And so the handful of people who are pissed about what I've written are drowned out by the, a million people who read the book and appreciate being informed about what's going on. So I really am the chicken at the ham and eggs breakfast. I don't feel that threatened.
Yeah. And so Brad, what did the book do to you personally, and how did it help the company?
So for the
Is
company,
it strange to be all of a sudden like a star in a Michael Lewis book?
Yeah, it was. I had read everything Michael had ever written before I actually met him.
That's not true. You'd read Moneyball, and you'd read.
No, it's true.
You didn't read the fatherhood book. You hadn't read.
Oh, I hadn't read.
There you go. See.
Okay, almost every
Don't
book.
exaggerate.
And I didn't read. You wrote a book called Pacific Rift on
right.
Japanese and
little.
American business culture,
Yeah.
which I read after we had met. You were really, because Michael really liked the fact that I was Japanese for a bit until you realized I wasn't really much of a Japanese person, right?
I was looking for an angle into your character, just like
One funny story is that I remember when Michael was kind of digging around. I told him that my parents were divorced when I was really young, and I remember you sat on your seat, you started writing. You're like, tell me more about that, and I said, well, they're still friends.
Of course.
We still golf together sometimes. He's like, he scratches it out. He's like, oh, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me. I need trauma. Which is funny. No, so yeah, my biggest concern was that, having read a lot of his books, that he has encountered a lot of characters, and I just never felt like I was a character, and so that kind of made me uncomfortable. Like I wasn't sure, and he did do a ton of research, and he flew to Canada. I met my friends and family, and I remember he flew back, and we sat down, and he basically said, I figured you out.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Reverse engineered you, yeah.
I figured you out. I was like, okay, here we go. I'm like, what'd you figure out? He goes, you were never looking for the fight. And he said, the fight found you.
Frodo.
Yeah, and he goes, and he basically said, he said, and you decided to fight back. And that was actually the time where I just became very comfortable with this, because it becomes hard if I feel like I'm portrayed in a way that I am not.
Yeah.
And now it's.
Well, you've made many friends along the way. You told me about your meeting with the former president.
Right. Yeah. So George Bush had read Flash Boys. 43 had read Flash Boys and was a fan. And I was actually I got invited to an SAP CEO conference, and he invited Ronan and I out to have lunch with him in Dallas, which was awesome. Michael's got such a huge audience that running into pockets of people that have read it. It's been great. But I feel like he really captured the characters. Like he nailed the characters.
Yeah.
In a way that I think we kind of can all kind of behave the way that we did before.
So just for sake, because we want to get into a Q&A and then let Michael go to sleep at some point. So let's talk a little bit about the Big Short. Phenomenal movie, great book, of course. What kind of an impact were you looking to have with The Big Short?
I don't really think that way usually about the books. I wanted to explain to myself how the crisis happened. In particular, it was a very narrow question that started it. I wanted to explain how the big banks that had call on the best and the brightest for 3 decades and seemed to be like filled with really smart, self-interested people had committed suicide. That interested me. It seemed like a puzzle, a question that needed to be answered. And so what did I want to achieve? When I got in the middle of it, I realized, I thought, like with this one, I had a story that was really significant for the culture to absorb. And I suppose in that case, I wanted to explain what had gone wrong in the financial system, but achieve the effects. After it comes out, it's not. I move on.
Yeah,
I really don't think. I'm really not. What I'm not is a natural.
Although
starter.
you are passionate about the cause here.
Well, yeah, but it's only because it's so irritatingly obvious what should happen and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
It's irritating to you. How do you think it...
Oh, it's unbelievable to me. I mean, I want to go punch people. I can't believe it's not. But in the case of what has tended to happen is I'm just a narrative nonfiction writer. I try to understand the thing as best I can and tell a story that interests me. And then when I'm done with it, I'm bored with it. I really am bored. I don't go reread it or think about it again. And then The Big Short got politicized very quickly. I mean, all these senators calling me up and wanting me to explain how Wall Street worked. And the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission kept calling me. And every time they call, you ever seen Life of Brian, the Monty Python? Of
course.
I tell them, I say, I'm not Jesus. You know, I just happen to live in the manger next door. And the book has the people in it who can explain to you everything I know plus more, because everything I know from the.
Do you feel that the movie did a good job of staying true to the
the movie did a spectacular job. I mean, it's so hard. You have to appreciate when people really love books. They tend to think the movies aren't as good as the books.
Yeah.
If they really, so I think sometimes movies are.
What is it with Brad Pitt and your books, by the way?
It's a bit of a coincidence. He didn't own Moneyball. He just wanted to play Billy Bean. And then we hit it off. I really liked him, so I did sell him The Big Short.
Okay.
I trusted him with it.
Yeah.
But the follow-up after it's not really not. I don't really. It's not. I'm not thinking what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
It goes out in the world and let the world deal with it.
Yes. And so the inevitable question I have is Flash Boys movie. And who's going to be playing Brad Katsuyama?
Yeah. It's actually a funny question because The Big Short movie's done so well, and that it's probably created some momentum for the Flash Boys project. I don't have anything to do with it, you know. So the Hollywood people will either do it or not. It's some ways an easier movie to make, in some ways a harder movie to make. But one of the obstacles is that he's Asian, Canadian Asian, but there's no movie star anybody knows who's Asian. And that actually, I can see him thinking about that. I think that's an opportunity. I think the whole point is to take someone no one knows and make him famous.
I can see Christian Bale doing anything pretty much.
Yeah. but you know, I really don't. I don't think very much about it. The movie people, it really is true. They're much happier when the author's dead.
Yeah.
They don't want they don't want you there. They don't, and if you're alive, you're this inconvenience. They need to be kind of polite to you and pretend to be interested in what you think.
Yeah.
And I don't, and it's just an awkward, false relation. So I don't really have any. They take the book and they do it or they don't do it. I'd say there's a 50-50 shot this thing gets made, and it would be, especially if the SEC does not let them go ahead. It would be very useful if it got made.
Well, I'm sure no one wants to play the villain in that movie.
It's so funny that people want to play the villain in real life. I mean, in this case, it really is. The villainy that took place in The Big Short, there was, in the financial crisis, there was some actual really bad behavior where people were very conscious of essentially the fraudulence they were engaged in. But a lot of it was stupidity. And it was very hard often to figure out the difference between the stupidity and the fraud, and I left that to the reader. I mean, one of the things I was thinking is leave to the reader. You describe what happened, leave the reader to decide whether this is fraud or this is just stupidity. In this case, this is not a question of like, is it fraud? These are really smart people doing really crooked shit, and they should be strung up, and they know what they're doing, and they think they can get away with it because it's complicated, and there's so much money at stake. They persist. But I mean, they've asked to be portrayed as villains. There really are villains in this story.
Strong words, and it's a wonderful way to conclude the conversation, the formal conversation. So we're going to open things up as far as Q&A. My only request is the first few minutes, if you have questions for Michael, let's take questions from Michael first, and then Brad will stay on.
Then the chicken is going to fly the coop.
That's right. Do we have mics? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, it seems like a very cut and dry case of insider trading, where the exchanges are the tippers and the people who buy those and trade on them are tippees. Why is it simply not regulated that way?
It's a really good question. I've wondered why these are questions. Anything that requires actual knowledge should be directed to Brad and ask me the things that require no knowledge at all. But I wondered that myself. It was one of the first questions I asked. Is this just seems like an insider trading case? In this case, it's much purer than insider trading. Is right. Insider trading cases are usually I tell you something material about the company. I'm not telling you the price of the shares. You're getting, in this case, you get advance word of the price of the shares. It does seem like a no-brainer. So I don't know why. You want to?
Sure, yeah, so a couple of the challenges. So regulation that was created in 2007 had to define what increment of time was immediate. And immediate at that point was defined as anything less than 1 second. The other challenge is that since when things are happening in microseconds, in exchanges, clocks will drift. Some exchanges aren't time stamping to that level of granularity. A trade that actually occurred as ABCD, if you try to gather that data and see the way it played out, it actually might look like DBCA. So it's very hard to put together a chronology of what's happened given how this is happening in micro time increments. So I think that it's become difficult to kind of pin down, unfortunately.
The real answer is they don't want to. They don't. The same people who would prosecute it for insider trading are deciding whether he can be an exchange or not. And you can tell from their behavior here that they certainly don't want to open that can of worms.
Other questions from Michael?
So one comment, one question on the comment side. You might take a look at Glenn, the guy from The Walking Dead, the guy that plays Glenn for the role of Brad. Right?
That's a compliment.
Yeah, I think so. So on the question, so Michael, full disclosure, I work in the financial markets. I actually work for a company that's invested in IEX. I'm curious to know, you've sold a bunch of books, sold a couple movies. Given the fact that you've sort of gone through the Wall Street looking glass and taken a bunch of people with you, how do you invest with confidence?
Well, for starters, one of the things that worried me right when Flash Boys exploded, when the book came out, was that people would think this means you're supposed to take your money out of the stock market, and that's not the conclusion you should draw from this. It's so though yes, it's true the stock market is unnecessarily complicated and probably prone to things like flash crises they shouldn't be. The basic the value of a share turns on the expected corporate earnings of the company you're invested in. This has little to do with that. This is so. The broader question of how I invest my money, I'm really not interested in it. I mean, I wasn't interested in it when I was on Wall Street, and I didn't ever think of myself as particularly good at it, so I do as little as possible. It's making some broad allocation decisions about stocks versus other things, and then once it's in stocks, I buy two things. I buy low-cost Vanguard funds, and I buy Berkshire Hathaway shares. And the Berkshire Hathaway shares I buy because he's the one person in the market, Buffett is the one person in the market whose capital is priced differently from everybody else's. That he gets deals that nobody else gets. And when times of real disruption, maybe now, but the worse it gets, the better it is for Buffett, because he's a very cool hand in difficult environments. So that's it. I never viewed my money as something I was supposed to turn into a whole lot more money. I just try not to lose it.
Yeah. Maybe someone back. Yeah.
Why not put a tax on transactions?
All right. This is something he's answered a lot more than I have, and you should probably just answer it.
So yeah, I think the challenge is there are a lot of productive forms of high-speed trading. So if you look at ETFs against the underlying stocks, at times if a big buyer in the ETF pushes the price up, you can short the ETF and buy the underlying stocks, let it settle back to fair value, and flip that trade out. So there are productive means of high-speed trading, and then there are also unproductive means. And I think transaction tax just ends up becoming this broad swath.
Has all these unintended consequences.
Yeah, it's a broad swath solution. I mean, IEX really, we're a precision solution to a precision problem, which is really why we feel that we fit within the regulation and we should have a chance to compete. But yeah, I think the market is better served with precision solutions, and especially ones that are made that don't involve the regulators, because solving things by rule always leads to more loopholes, more inefficiencies, and more exploitation. So we should really try to do that as little as possible.
Where's the mic?
Michael, you do so much research into your books, and sometimes it seems like you can make anything interesting. I'm curious to know.
My wife doesn't agree. She has the actually opposite.
I'm curious to know if you've ever kind of gotten halfway down the road towards writing a book and then decided, there's no story here, or it doesn't work the way I want it.
Yes.
What's that been like?
A specific example is I got a long way. I've never actually put the words on the paper, but I've done an awful lot of reporting, kind of research, and then abandoned projects. The most dramatic example was I was going to write a sequel to Moneyball. And in fact, I sold Moneyball. When I decided I was going to write a book about baseball, I can remember the email I sent my publisher late at night when I figured out that Moneyball was a book. I said, there are 2 books. The bad news is I'm writing a book about baseball, because I'd never written about sports. And the worst news is it's 2 books, and you got to buy 2 books. And the first book is I'm only doing so I can write the second book. And the first book is going to be called Moneyball, and the second book is going to be called Underdogs, and it's going to follow the kids that the Oakland A's drafted in 2003, who were drafted by algorithm basically, as opposed to scout judgment, and a lot of them were shocked that anybody thought they were professional baseball players, or at least the caliber that the A's judged them to be. I wanted to see what happened to them, so I spent years. 3-4 years out every minor league season on buses, in motel rooms. I mean, just following these guys' lives. And I've got a massive amount of material, and I can never figure out quite what to do with it. And I think what happened was, the conception of that book was, I was going to do a lot more of what I did in Moneyball in that book. There was going to be, it was going to follow the development of the analytics movement in sports alongside these guys' career. And Moneyball was it ended up being so noisy that it ate everything that was going to come after it. And so I've ended up walking away from it. It's so hard to do. Ignoring sunk cost is it's one of those things that a wise person, you should teach your children how to ignore sunk costs, because people don't naturally do it, and people have all kinds of mistakes in life, not ignoring it. And I try to tell myself, sometimes you just got to cut. But it's hard to do when you've done a lot of work. I mean, it seems like you just wasted your life. But it's happened several occasions. That's the biggest occasion.
So, Michael, I know you have to take off, and I really appreciate the time.
And we're not regarding this as sunk cost, by the way. I'm not walking away because I just figured out that I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, I mean, it's 24 hours on the road. That's definitely a good enough excuse for us.
We're going to leave him here for more
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. So
Right.
thank you very much.
Michael.
Thanks so much.
Back
Okay,
here in the back. Straight back. Chuck Jones from Forbes. Brad, what are the arguments that the cabal is using to not have IEX be a public exchange?
Sure. So there's 2 regulations. One's the Exchange Act of 1934, and the other one's Regulation NMS. And NMS is a 500-page document, and in there, there's 2 words: intentional device. And what it says is that an exchange can't use an intentional device to delay access to quotes. And if you read it literally, you would think that a box of cable is a device, and we're intentionally slowing down people's ability to trade on IEX, except for the fact that we got the idea from existing exchanges. So existing exchanges, when you pay to be in the New York Stock Exchange data center, what happened was that people that were in the back corner of the data center started to complain that the people that were closer to the matching engine actually had a shorter cable, and their cable was longer. Every foot of cable is 1/billionth of a second, so it gives you a sense of what people were fighting over. But it was a legitimate enough argument where the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and BATS, the 3 major exchanges, all did this, where they measured the farthest corner of their data center, gave everyone the same length of cable, and the person closest had a coiled cable. This has been happening for years. So when we decided, at IEX, and this is, we read the regulation front to back, and we said, great, Exchanges are allowed to coil cable. We're going to coil cable. The other thing that it says is back to this word immediate. The fact that people making the statement that 350 microseconds is not immediate, I think kind of have lost kind of sense of reality in a way, because the market isn't acting in this instantaneous uniform motion. When you measure things in microseconds, things are happening randomly all over the place. If an exchange that's located in a different geography is sending messages and you're seeing that at a different time than exchanges that are closer to you. So in a way, intentional device is one of the crutches, but it just doesn't hold up because existing exchanges under the current regulation are allowed to coil cable to equalize latency. They just coil cable to make it fair for people who have paid them hundreds of millions of dollars for that privilege. We coil cable for free for everybody. So actually you would think that our coiling of cable complies with the regulations slightly more than theirs does. And ultimately, and I guess what gives us a lot of confidence is that Regulation NMS makes a very clear statement where they say, when the interests of short-term traders and long-term investors conflict, it's the Commission's responsibility to uphold the interests of long-term investors. So we do feel like, in principle, what IEX does doesn't require any rule change, doesn't require any special treatment. We fall squarely within the regulation. And the challenge is that they're trying to change the rules on us as we're applying, meaning that historical precedent doesn't have a lot to do with letting a new entrant compete on the same terms. And I think that's really what the crux of this argument is going to be. And there have been a lot of suggestions through this process, some of them made conveniently by high-speed traders, on how IEX should adjust our model, eliminate the speed bump, stop slowing this down, or do that. And unfortunately, these things would all compromise our ability to protect investors. So we're unwilling to do that, which actually makes this a very, very tough negotiation on all sides. Because
wait, what's the next milestone for IEX? So
March 21st is when we expect a decision. And it's in our best interest to get that decision made as soon as possible. And they have, our market's grown tremendously. Our first day of trading, we did 568,000 shares, and we were pretty excited about that. Yesterday was our newest record. We did 466 million shares. We almost traded $10 billion in notional. The market has taken off. But there are limits to how much we can grow if we're not an exchange. And that's really, we're trying to remove those limits. So, but March 21st, we expect there to be a decision. And that gives, we have 60 days to try to talk to as many people as possible, try to garner as much support as we can. And, ultimately, whatever that decision is, hopefully we've gained a large enough amount of support that it gives, whether it happens on March 21st or some point after that, we'll be given the right to compete.
Where's the mic? Oh, thank you.
Hey, Brad, question. Here at Silicon Valley, we talk about strategy and competition and risks. What happens if they do approve you and a month later, the existing exchanges just meet the exact same coiling? I assume it's not a very big technical challenge, right?
Yeah. It's funny. So Ronan, we were talking the other day, and he said we've spent millions and millions of dollars on technology. Our system processed 1.8 billion messages yesterday, and all this fighting's over an $8,000 box of coiled cable. The reason exchanges won't coil cable is because they make hundreds of millions of dollars selling fast access. No one will pay hundreds of millions of dollars to be on the other end of a 38-mile coiled cable. So really, it's in their economic best interest to not do that. And that's really why I think there's such a huge fight. The fight really, if IEX is approved as an exchange, what that means is that exchanges don't have to compete on speed. It actually makes speed less relevant if an exchange is approved that has actually, even by 350 microseconds, has slowed itself down. So if speed is less important, that's bad for people who need speed to make money. And that's really bad for people who sell speed for hundreds of millions of dollars, which is really why this fight has kind of taken the shape that it's taken. Is because they know what it means if IEX is approved as an exchange, and it means a lot of money out of their pockets.
Next question.
Yeah, this is a highly political issue. Obviously, Wall Street is the talk of the presidential elections. Is this something that's come up in the course of political debate? Are people aware of this and how it could impact Wall Street? And is that a way to get some advocacy?
Yeah, it hasn't come up yet. In general, we've been pretty conservative through this process. It was a process that, and again, maybe Mike would probably make fun of me for saying this, but we tried to play by the rules in a way where all of IEX's comments during this process were through comment letters we submitted to the SEC. Our first one was 26 pages because we addressed every comment, and our second one was 50 pages because we addressed every comment. And then we found out that no one read our responses, and meanwhile we're getting smeared all over the place in the general public, et cetera. So we're just now starting to talk more openly about what's happening and why it's important. But it hasn't made its way to the presidential debates. We've been kind of provoked in a couple different ways to give information, but I think that those debates are I'm not sure. But the short answer is it hasn't. Maybe at some point it does get there though.
Yeah. Next question.
Brad, you brought up the issue of Silicon Valley. My guess is that some of the people in the room actually paid for the technology that's used for high-frequency trading and created much of that technology.
Yeah.
Where do you think the role of Silicon Valley and what they do having public good associated rather than now you having to create a problem that was caused by investments that were made here?
Yeah, actually, I was sitting next to someone that was telling me about all the servers they were selling to Wall Street. Part of it is, technology has created so many benefits. I really, I can't fault people for wanting to make trades go faster and wanting to create efficiencies. It's really when it's misused, and I think it's up to the industry to ensure that it's not misused. I don't think it's, it's a vendors or it's the people kind of creating the chipsets or supplying the servers. It's up to the industry to, in a way, police itself. Rami made the comparison to Uber, and I read an article about Uber in London. And they talked about, okay, we'll let Uber in London if you can't show a car on an app and you have to administer a 5-minute waiting period before a car can come. And ultimately what they're doing is these conditions are making it worse for the passenger.
That's
right? And in a way, the industry loses sight of why the stock market exists in the first place. The stock market exists is to help companies raise capital and to help investors allocate that capital. None of what we've talked about today has anything to do with that. And really our focus is about trying to turn this back on companies and back towards investors and the shareholders. And all of the money that's being wasted building this technology it's societal waste. The diminishing returns of 1 incremental microsecond of speed or 3. New York Stock Exchange has now put laser beams on their roof to shoot messages back and forth faster than subterranean cable. All of that money is just, it's really not helping anyone other than the people who sell it and the people who buy it at the expense of other people. So
do you think that other than technology, is there room for legislation changes?
I don't think so, because really you can't get in the game of regulating speed. In 2007, they thought less than 1 second was a reasonable time frame, and now we're talking about millions of seconds. I have no idea what we'll be talking about, 8 years from now. Yeah. So I do feel like the market needs to solve a lot of these issues. When I was at RBC, we went down to the SEC and said, hey, here's everything that we've discovered, and here's what we found. It just didn't seem like there was a lot of movement. And so that's part of why we decided to start IEX, was to say, let's reform this ourselves, but do it in a way that fits within the rules. It was really important for us to be a market-based solution, which is why it's so frustrating that people are trying to change the regulation
on the fly,
to stop us from competing, or reconsidering the entire. Let's reconsider the entire rule set before we let this company in.
Which would take years and years.
It's the polite way to not attack IEX, but to absolutely attack IEX,
yes.
And that's been the common rhetoric, and it just gets us nowhere.
It's another form of a speed bump. So, question.
Hi. So first of all, Brad, thank you, and thank all your team for creating IEX. That's really inspiring. I had a question about your management style. Having read the book, and actually I listened to it on Audible like over and over and over again every night. So you have very eccentric people that at least initially you hired, right? You have Schwal and you have Schwalism, and you hired puzzle masters, like really, unusual people. But you were kind of okay with it. Like if Schwal called you up and said, hey, I'm not showing up today, you're totally fine with that.
Still happens, actually.
So how do you decide, like, this person is smart enough or is productive enough that I'm just going to let them loose for a while, and then at what point do you bring them back on track?
So I think, so I guess there's two parts. So number one is trust. We have an immense amount of trust in each other. So if Ronan or John says, this is important to me, whether I know what that is or not, it immediately becomes important to me because it's important to them. Management style has always kind of been an appreciation for people. And in general, and this has kind of been true of almost everyone that I've ever managed, is that their greatest strength is also a part of their greatest weakness. People that are extremely passionate have a huge amount of energy and have a huge amount of driving force, but that passion can work against them by being reactive and getting emotional about things, et cetera. John Schwal is our COO, and he has an obsessive streak about him, but he also knows every single detail of our business and every single detail of regulation. I've never known anyone to sweat the details as much as him, but it comes with prices. And so when you realize that the weaknesses that at times I have to manage are actually a derivative of the reason I hired them in the first place, it actually gives them the room and it gives me the headspace to let them be them. It's funny because I didn't really learn that. My job at RBC at first was to run trading, and it was human traders. And a lot of them kind of are the same. They're most of them are, a lot of them are former athletes. They're very type A. They're very aggressive. And but when I moved over to electronic and started amassing this team, I said, well, I'm surrounded by a lot of different kinds of people. But I found that the skill sets were so unique. Each person was bringing such a unique talent to the table, and I found a common theme in trying to find ways to get them to get along with each other. And there's a lot of people at RBC here or from IEX. I've had this talk with everyone. Your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, and so is the person across from you. And that, I think, gives a sense of appreciation for people in the room and lets you work it out in the bad times.
And by the way, another form of asking the same question is, are you guys hiring?
So yeah, we've been kind of adding people. It's funny. After the 60 Minutes episode aired, before the end of 60 Minutes, we literally had 500 resumes sent into our careers inbox. And so when we have openings, we actually go through. We've divided them up, and we have over 1,000 resumes now, or thousands. But yeah, I mean, we've hired a lot of people. I actually look for people now that haven't worked on Wall Street. I find that kind of the diversity of opinion is really important in the room. There's certain skill sets you need to hire from Wall Street, and there's certain ones that you don't. So yeah, we're always looking for kind of the right people.
Which again, I mean, I made a reference earlier to Tesla, and I think that's their philosophy as well. Hire outsiders or people who can bring a very different philosophy.
Yeah, the hardest part about what we do is trying to make something extremely complicated simple. Because the simpler I can make it, the better, the more you can understand what it is that we're trying to do and how it benefits you. And a lot of times outsiders are the ones who aren't lost in the in the details. Yeah.
So we have time for one more question, I believe.
Are you guys finding that you're getting any support from the large institutional investors, the big mutual fund companies, or the large pensions to kind of counter the?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually owned by a lot of large investors. So Carl from Capital Group and Brandis is here too. So Franklin Templeton, Mass Mutual. So we have huge support from the institutional community. A lot of them have written letters to the SEC. Texas Teachers Retirement just wrote a really important one last week where they essentially said to the SEC, we have data that shows IEX has saved our constituents, who are teachers and public school employees in Texas, millions of dollars. Those are really, really powerful statements that hopefully, the SEC considers when they decide whether we should be allowed to kind of grow the way we think we can grow. So yeah, we've had a lot of support from the institutional community. Norges Bank, who's one of the largest pension funds in the world, wrote a very complimentary letter. So we're getting that support. It can always be bigger. I'd say that there's thousands of funds out there. We probably had 30 or so write letters. But again, it's we have a really good kind of group of partners. And part of the hard part is that we're kind of in a battle. And people have day jobs. People care about the markets. It's on a day like yesterday when the market's getting devastated, the last thing I want to do is ask someone to write a letter on behalf of IEX when portfolios are getting destroyed. So I think it's we haven't really asked for a lot of help simply because it just really hasn't been our thing. But I think given that this is a real battle, we are outmanned and outgunned, and we're being outspent in DC. Now's the time where we really got to kind of get out there and start asking for help. Like, now's the time we need it. We really haven't asked for it, but now's the time we need it.
Well, I think you've made about 300 new fans here, so good work. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'd like to thank you, Brad and Rami, and we've thanked Michael for sharing your views so candidly. This has been a wonderful evening. As a small token of our appreciation, we would like to present you with the Churchill Club Speaker T-shirt.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. That was great.
And you have been a wonderful, wonderful audience. Thank you so much. See you next time. Good night.